right?
No such thing. Everything's hard.
Okay, I'm going to start us off on the sponsors, and hopefully Marvin and everybody else will be joining on board shortly. All right, there's Zev. Okay, if Zev is home, he must have ran all the way from Shul. Okay.
I didn't use my tefillin. I didn't wrap up the tefillin and the talis. I just took it home that way.
Okay, Zev. All right, I'm starting the sponsors. Year of Learning, Dr. Paul Koningsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Ruven ben Labush, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nisan Hara, Nisan ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Rav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Hadiah bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, Shal Shur, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel ben Harav Shimon. A Month of Learning by Chaim and Phyllis Reese, in memory of his father, Mordechai ben Yom Tov Lipa, by Phyllis and Chaim Reese, in memory of her father, Pinchas ben Avraham. As a day of learning today by Jane and Bob Kolb, in memory of her mother, Bela Bas David. May the Shamas have an aliyah, Krank Rafia, Velta Yeshir, Hashem Matzliah, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Gaben Shtiar.
Amen.
Okay. Okay. Morning, Isaac. Okay. All right, we're going to start in a moment the Gemara. Just want a quick review with the fact that we saw this business at the end of Ted Vav Amud Beis, where they referred to another attempt to explain the Mishnah, okay? And what the machloket was in this case between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir. And basically said to us that machloket was based on the question of liquids that became tameh, what their status is in terms of being machshir. In other words, making something else susceptible to tumah. And the Gemara there finished on the bottom of Ted Vav Amud Beis that Rabbi Yossi went according to his view, Rabbi Meir according to his view. That Rabbi Meir's view was tumat mashkin l'tamei achirim d'Rabbanan, that by rabbinic enactment, liquids could make tamei something else. Rabbi Yossi felt that tumat mashkin l'tamei achirim d'oraita, that was a Torah requirement. And then on the top of Ted Zion Amud Aleph, we saw the Gemara told us, and this is just quickly reviewing what we did yesterday. Sefek mashkin l'tamei, tamei. Okay, that according to the Braita, right, if it was a doubtful status of the beverage, okay, it would render itself could become tamei. The tamei acharim tahor divrei Rabbi Meir. but because he felt it was D'Rabbanan, okay, to render other items tamei, that was not the case. L'cheina ya Rabbi Eliezer, or Rabbi Elazar, Omer Kidvarav. And Rabbi Elazar agreed with that view of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda, Omer L'kol Tamei. And Rabbi Yehuda, however, said that liquids, even safek tamei liquids, could render something, other things, tamei. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon is where we're going to begin this morning, right? So that's about 3 to 4 lines down in the Gemara. Okay? To finish up this particular inyan, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon omrim la'ochalin tmein, that in terms of other foodstuffs, okay, that they can render them, these beverages, okay, can render them tameh, okay, even when these beverages are safek tameh, lekelim tahori. But in regards to utensils, okay, we said that they, if they've touched a tameh beverage because of the doubt, therefore they are, the kelim are still tahor. V'savar Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar was of the opinion, mashkin id lahotuma ba'olam. So we're asking the question, basically, what was the opinion of Rabbi Elazar? Did he hold these beverages, these liquids, susceptible according to Torah law? Bahatanya, but wasn't it taught elsewhere in a Braita? Rabbi Elazar Omer, Ein Tuma Lamashkin Ko Ikar, that it seemed to imply that Rabbi Elazar holds that the Tuma does not apply to beverages under biblical law, okay, implying that he may have thought it was only the Rabbanan and not the Doraita. Teda, Shaharei He'id Yosef ben Yoezer. No, says the Gemara, that when Yosef ben Yoezer, Ish Tzreda, gave his testimony, remember he was one of the first of the Zugot, early Tanaim, right? Al Ayil Kamsa, when he gave his testimony in regards to a kind of grasshopper that was considered kosher, that's the Ayil Kamsa, that it has called like an ayil, okay, a jumping ram, because it had horns, its antenna struck out like horns. Dachan, that it was kosher, pure. Va'al mashkin beit mitbachaya, dachan, and that the liquids, in other words, that after the slaughtering of the animals, the blood and the water that mixed and therefore flowed through the, I'll call it the passageway there on the, okay, that was also pure, tahor, pure, kosher. Okay. So that was the case. So now the Gemara says, Hanech Shmuel. That view, okay, was acceptable to Shmuel. The Amar Dachan Milatame Tumat Acherim. Because Shmuel also held that these questionable liquids, beverages, okay, were pure in regarding other beverages, other liquids. Aval tumat atzman yesh lehen shapir. But that they themselves could be tameh, that he felt was appropriate, and that was acceptable. Okay. Ela Rav, but according to Rav, the Amar Dachan Mamash, Rav, however, disagreed with Shmuel there and said that they were really tahor and they weren't susceptible to tuma whatsoever. Okay, my ikala meimar. What are we going to say? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, trying to explain achada. It really only referred to one of Rabbi Meir's statements. Vaha kidvarav ka'amar. And therefore, that's why we said it was like, instead of midivreihem, kidivreihem, that's why he argues also it should have been kidvarav, denafishe, right? Why? Because he said these were more, okay? Implying that when it says kidivreihem, it could be multiple views of Rabbi Meir. Va'od, and furthermore, Vaha v'chein katani, and it also taught, again, furthermore, okay, kasha. Indeed, that's why it's problematic. Okay, so in other words, coming back to our original Mishnah, when it said midivreihem, we have a problem with what Rabbi Meir, who was basing it on. At best, we can say it should have been one person's opinion. Now, since we've raised this machloket between Rav and Shmuel, the Gemara wants to examine it in more detail. Gufa, let's examine this. Rav Amar Dachan Mamash. Rav said that these liquids, questionable if they're tuma or not, they themselves were pure. Okay? Ushmuel Amar Dachan Milatame Tumat Achirim. And Shmuel said that they are pure, tahor, when it comes to, excuse me, conveying tuma to other objects, aval to other liquids, aval tumat atzmam. Okay, but in terms of their own tuma, yesh lehem. They are considered tummy. And carrying further explanation, Rav Amar Dachan Mamash, Rav saying that they are tahor completely. Kasavar, he was of the opinion, Tumat Mashkin de Rabbanan, that any tuma for these beverages, for these liquids, is rabbinical. V'ki Gazru Rabbanan, and when the rabbis made this gezerah, this decree, b'mashkin da alma, they were talking about beverages, liquids in general. Ubamashkin beit mitbachaya, lo gazur. But in regards to the liquids that flow on the Beis HaMikdash, okay, namely we said that mixture of blood and water, okay, that flows through the passageways there, the rabbis did not make a decree that those would be tameh. Ushmuel Amar, says Shmuel, Dachan milatame tumat acherim. Again, reviewing that it was tahor in regards to rendering some other object. Aval tumat atzman yesh lahem. But they themselves are susceptible to becoming tameh, that he argued that they were. Kasavar, because Shmuel was of the opinion, Tum'at Mashkin Atzman Deoraita, that the tuma of these beverages, of these liquids, on their own was Torah mandated. Latame Acherim de Rabbanan, whereas to make other items susceptible to tuma was rabbinical. B'ki Gazur Rabbanan, and when the rabbis made this gezerah, b'mashkin da alma, they were talking about liquids in general. B'mashkin beit mitbachaya lo gazur. But in regards to the liquids that were associated with the altar and the slaughtering, okay, in the temple, the rabbis did not make a decree. V'chi lo gazur rabbanan l'tmuye acherim, and that when the rabbis made the decree, okay, that it should render susceptible to tuma other objects, aval tumat atzman yesh lehem, okay, that they did not make it to render the decree to render other objects tamei, but only themselves, only the liquids themselves. Now, Amar le Rav Huna bar Chinina, we see another libre. So following up on this machloket of Rav and Shmuel, okay, we see the following, that Rav Huna tells his son the following. Ki aliyat lekame de Rav Papa, when you go up to yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael and see Rav Papa, Rami le mi amar Shmuel, dachan milatame tumat acherim, aval tumat atzman yesh lehem. Okay, ask Rav Papa, did Shmuel really say, okay, that these liquids, these beverages, do not, okay, or I'll phrase it differently, only are susceptible themselves to tuma, but they don't transfer tuma to other objects. Kare Khan, and read him in that regard the following pasuk, V'habasar asher yiga b'chol tameh lo yeachel, right? The meat of kodshim that touches anything tameh shall not be eaten, which seems to imply if there's any liquid that comes off that meat, it would or ought to render other objects tameh. So that's his challenge. So to this, we find another example. Amar Rav Shisha, Bar di Rav Idi. Okay, he also raises another issue. Okay, namely, what's the issue? Whether that liquids from the Beit Mitbachaya should render other things tameh. What's his response? Dahava Arvi'i B'Kadesh. He says, what was it? Okay, he says that that area where they slaughtered, okay, that they were only on a fourth level of tuma. That was the issue, or that their level of sanctity was such that it could only convey up to kodshim. That was the issue. To something, remember we have Av Tuma, Rishon Latuma, Sheni Latuma, Shlishi Tuma, which was Truma, and then only fourth level would be Kodshim. Okay? So that was his attempt to answer. Okay? However, not everybody accepts that explanation. Mat Kifla Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi challenged it. And his answer was, Re'i vi'i b'kodesh lo ikre tameh. That's something that on a fourth level, okay, it's not called tameh, right? Hai ikre tameh. We suddenly call it tameh. Actually, it should be called pasul, right? Kasha. And indeed, that's problematic. So attempting now to raise an better understanding of what this machloket was between Rav and Shmuel, where Rav said, remember, okay, it has no biblical means of conveying tumah whatsoever. We bring a braita. Tashma, b'chol mashke, asher yishteh b'chol kli yitma. The braita says that any beverage that could be drunk in a container, in a vessel, will be tameh. Okay? Doesn't that certainly tell us that beverages become tameh? Okay?
Weren't we just talking about just the blood on the altar?
Right. We tried to see, we raised that question because we thought maybe the rabbis made an exception with that liquid, the blood and the water mixed. And that was that was perhaps the only exception. If you say that liquids can make other things tameh d'Rabbanan. Okay? Ted, you with me?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay? All right? But Rav apparently doesn't even accept that. So how then do we understand Rav's attitude says that liquids don't render anything? They don't make anything susceptible. Okay, and by the way, ultimately, just jumping ahead, we don't paskin that way, by the way.
Okay.
Okay? We're going to see in a moment that that's not the case. Anyway, so based on my yitma, what do we mean when we say it makes it tameh? Hichshir, says the Gemara. It makes it susceptible to tuma. In other words, it's the liquid, okay, that allows one object to sort of transmit the tuma to another object. So naturally, we should ask the question, what liquids? And the Gemara ultimately, at some point, needs to tell us that what kind of liquids, okay, does that apply to? So we'll see. Hichshir, asks the Gemara, it makes it susceptible. Meresha dekra shematle. You learn that, says the Gemara, from the beginning of the pasuk, that liquids can make something else tameh. Okay, make it susceptible to tumah. Mikol ha'ochel asher ye'ochel v'gomer. Okay, that is the pasuk, right? Where it says of any food that is edible, and if the rest of the pasuk, if we were to cite the rest of the pasuk, okay, which if you look at note 18, if you're using Art Scroll, it does for us. Mikol ha'ochel asher ye'ochel, asher yavo alav mayim, yitma v'chol mashkeh, asher yishateh, b'kol kli yitma. So that part of the pasuk that says which water comes, and so we derive if water is going to make something susceptible to tuma, therefore other liquids similar to water, like milk, like date honey, like we'll come up with a few others in a couple minutes. Okay, that's the case. Okay.
Let me ask you, does the Gemara say that, does the Torah say that they become tumah, or they're just hechsher l'tumah?
They're hechsher l'tumah. Okay, that's the point that the Gemara is saying. So the Gemara then continues, right? Chad b'tlushin, v'chad b'mechubarin. Maybe we're talking about in that pasuk, there's a difference between liquid that is, so to speak, removed, or liquid that's attached. If it's attached to the ground, maybe it's one thing, right? Or detached from the ground, it's one thing. If it's still attached in the ground, maybe it's something else, right? Maybe that's the difference. Utsrichi, says the Gemara. But we need this, I'm going to say, clarification, right? Why? The iyashme'inin betlushin. Okay, if we thought that we're only talking about liquids that are detached, in other words, flowing liquids, right? Mishum da'ach shavinhu. Why? Because they're significant. Okay, once they flow, they're free. They can convey something from one object to another. Okay, avad mechubarin. But if they're not attached, if they're still liquid that is, let's say, into the ground, okay? Therefore, they're not really moving, they're not flowing. Emelo, I might say no. Ve'ei tana mechubarin mishum dekame beduchtayu. And if you want to teach that liquids that are attached into the ground, okay, because they're in their place, as I said, they're not flowing, chashivi, that they're going to be considered important, significant, okay? And therefore, maybe they should also make things susceptible to tumor, right? Aval tlushin, but regarding something that's disattached, that's flowing, emalo, I might say no, tzrichi. That's why I needed both parts of the verse to tell me that not only, right, if it's like water, right? Asher yavo alav mayim, like water that's flowing, but also b'chol mashke asher yishateh b'kol kli yitma. But something, a liquid that is in a kli, that is, I want to say, together, attached, coagulated almost, okay? Because blood is going to be another liquid that can be machshir, okay? That will also. So it's not the removal of the liquid, the flowingness, if I can use that term, or the gatheredness of the liquid that renders it, but both can be make something susceptible to tumor. Okay. Tashma. Now we get to another Braita. Okay. This Braita also is going to challenge Rav's view that liquids don't render something susceptible to tumor. Okay. Ach ma'ayan ubor. Okay. What about a spring or a cistern? Okay. Mikveh mayim, where it's a gathering of water, yeh tahor. That says it will be tahor. Okay. That it can't become tameh. And that would seem to me to say that these things are deoraita, right? Ma'yeh tahor. What do we mean when we say it's tahor? Mitum ato. It means it's tahor for the one who uses that body of water to become tahor. Utlushin. And when we use the phrase tlushin mi machshirin, do we say then that detached, flowing water is going to make something susceptible? V'ha'amar Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Chanina. Says Rabbi Yossi in the name of Rabbi Chanina. Okay. Mashkin beit mitbachaya. Okay, regards to the liquids that were associated with the slaughtering area. We said that was a mixture of blood and water, right? Lo dayan shehe dachan. It's not sufficient, right? Right? We don't say that that if we say that that not only are they tahor, okay, ela she'ein machshirin, but would we say also that that liquid doesn't render things susceptible to tumor? Tirgama al dam. It was explained in regards to the issue of specifically blood, right? So what we're saying is that the sacrificial blood alone may not render something susceptible to tumor, but perhaps the mixture of the blood and the water might. Okay. The Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba. This is Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Minayin ladam kodashim she'eno machshir. So here comes the essential question, asks Rabbi Chia bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. How do we know that this blood that comes off sacrifices does not render other things susceptible to tumah? Shene'amar al haaretz tishbachenu kamayim. On land, right, on the ground, you shall spill it like water. Dam shenishpach kamayim machshir, says the Gemara. Blood that's spilled on the ground like water does render things susceptible, just as water does. However, let's go over to the next Amud. Dam she'eno nishpach kamayim. But any blood that does not flow on to the ground, okay, like water, eino machshir, does not render things susceptible to tumah. So at this point, okay, just as a quick review, we would say that wine, honey, oil, milk, dew, blood, and water. These are the 7 liquids that are machshir, that produce susceptibility to impurity. Now, having said this, we just made a distinction, right, between dam that flows out of the animal, of the kodshim, into the floor, okay, and gets mixed with the water, right, versus blood that doesn't flow on the ground. Now, what we've all studied enough Gemara to know what blood might not flow on the ground, the blood that spurts out first from the animal that's caught in the bowl by the Kohen. But what about blood that then begins to flow out of that, call it that wound, okay, that the makom shchita, after the Kohen has collected that blood for zrika purposes? What about that blood? Okay. So that is going to be our next area that we're going to examine. Matkifla Rav Shmuel bar Ami. So Rav Shmuel bar Ami challenges this interpretation of which blood is machshir, because he says, Hare dam hatamtzit the nishpach kamayim. What about this blood that's squeezed, that trickles, okay, after the initial blood spurt that I'm saying is caught by the Kohen in the container for the purposes of zrika? There's still some blood that's going to trickle out, squeeze out, following the slaughter. Ve'eno machshir. And do we say that this blood, okay, it does not render susceptible to things susceptible to tumah? Amarle Rabbi Zera, says Rabbi Zera, hinach ledam hatamtzit. Rabbi Zera tells him, put aside for the moment the issue of this trickling blood. Da'afilu b'chulin nami lo machshir. Because we say there that even when it's not kodshim, okay, when it's simply chulin meat, it also is not machshir. Okay? It also doesn't render items susceptible to tumah. Now, what happens? Kibla mine Rav Shmuel bar Ami. It seems that Rav Shmuel bar Ami accepted that statement of Rabbi Zera, Da'amar Rachmana. Why? Because he found a pasuk, right, where the Torah says, "Rak chazak levilti echol hadam, ki hadam hu anefesh." Right? Namely, only be strong not to eat the blood, for the blood is the, we're going to say, life essence. Dam shehanefesh yotzeit bo karui dam. Blood in which the life essence of the animal leaves, right? The life of the animal leaves, that is truly considered blood. Dam she'ein hanefesh yotzei bo. Blood where the life essence, the life of the animal doesn't lead, no karui dam, is not considered, if you will, true blood. All right? Okay. Now, since we're talking about the issue of blood, right? Okay, we're going to go on. And here we have another Braita. Okay? Again, the Braita is going to bring us a statement that is going to really be a challenge to Rav's opinion, where he said no liquid renders is machshir. Tashma, listen to the following Braita. Dam shenitma v'zarko b'shogeg hurtza. If you have blood that became tameh, right, and nevertheless, by accident, the Kohen used it for sprinkling, hurtza, we say that that offering is acceptable. B'mezid, if he did it, however, on purpose, deliberately, lo hurtza, then the offering is not acceptable. Midrabanan. But what about we actually say here that maybe that this whole issue of liquids being machshir is not deoraita. Maybe we're going to say that it's only derabanan. Udeloka Rabbi Yossi ben Yoezer ish tzreida. Then it would not be as testified by Rabbi Yossi ben Yoezer ish tzreida. Is that possible? Okay. We don't have an answer. Okay. Art Scroll, by the way, makes a period there. Koren makes a question mark there. Right? Furthermore, the Gemara then continues, right, with another Braita. Tashma, listen to the following Braita. Alma hetzitz martze. Okay. What does the tzitz worn by the Kohen Kadol, what does it atone for? Al hadam, va'al habasar, va'al hachelev, shenitma bein b'shogeg bein b'mezid. For the blood, for the meat, for the fat that became tameh, whether it was carried out, let's say, right? Whether it was done by accident, okay, or done on purpose, right? I'm going on then. Bein ba'onis, bein baratzon. Whether it was done, again, accident, by mishap, or willingly. Bein biyachid, bein b'tzibur, midirabanan. Or whether it was done, okay, as an offering for an individual, or as an offering by the community. It is to be considered, says the Gemara. You're going to use that as an argument that say that doesn't go along with Yossi ben Sreda? Actually, he says, midirabanan. What we're saying is here that these 7 liquids are machshir derabanan. Udelo ki Yosef ben Yoezer ish tzreda. And then we're saying that it would not be according to the testimony of Rabbi Yossi ben ish tzreda. Let's try another example. What about the following Braita? Tashma. Listen to this Braita. V'nasa Aharon et Avon HaKodshim. So that Aaron, right? Again, this is also referring to the tzitz. That Aaron bears the sin of the sacred or the holy offerings. V'chi eza avon hu no say. And what sin, asks the Gemara, does the tzitz of Aaron bring tshuva, so to speak? Right? Im avon pigul. If it's going to be the sin of pigul, right? Of something that was inadvertent, that the offering was not the right offering by intent, okay? Or was left, right? And not eaten in the right time. Harei kfar ne'amar. This is already known to us. It's already said because it says lo yeratzeh, that it is not acceptable. Im avon notar, if it's the sin of notar, something left over, right, a korban, harei kfar ne'amar lo yechashev. It's again already said it should not be considered. Okay? In other words, not to be considered a valid korban. Ha, eino no say, ela avon tuma. We must therefore say that it can only come to bring repentance on some sort of a sin of tuma, where it was an offering of an individual. Okay? Because we know that when there is a offering of the community that could be tamei, all right, it's even possible for a tamei kohen to offer that tamei offering. So the Gemara tells us, shehutra miklala b'tzibor. Why? Because we therefore see that is permitted, right? There is this permission, an exception, okay, to the general rule regarding a communal offering. My love tumat dam. Aren't we saying here then that it's the sin of tuma regarding the blood of the offering? Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, lo tumat kamatzim. No, says Rav Papa. We're talking here about the kamatzim, the handfuls of flour of the meal offering. And that we considered a parallel to the sprinkling of the blood, which would allow a Kohen to eat. So again, we don't have clear proof against the challenge, the position of Rav. So finishing up a little bit further, Tashma. Let's listen to another Braita. Hein yisa ish basar kodesh beknaf bigdo. Okay, come and we learn the following, right? Namely that if a person has, we saw, by the way, remember, previously, we learned that if somebody saw a sheretz in the Beis Hamikdash, he was supposed to take his sash and wrap up the sheretz in the sash and then carry it out. So we see somewhat of a parallel here. Hein yisa ish basar kodesh beknaf bigdo. Okay. What about the fact that a person, if he carries some sort of flesh of, let's say, if it's a sheretz, again in his sash, right? And it touches, right, the corner of his garment, right? V'naga b'knafo shel halechem. And it touches, and not only that, the garment then touches the bread, okay? ve'el hanazid, ve'el hayayin, or it touches the stew or the wine or the oil, ve'el hashemen, ve'el kol ma'achal hekdesh, or any other, all right, sanctified item. Is it going to render it contaminated? Right? What happens? V'ya'anu ha'kohanim v'yomru lo. And the Kohanim replied, no, right? It does not become contaminated. Let's just go over a tiny bit on Yud Zayin. Va'amar Rav, says Rav, ishtabesh kahane, that the Kohanim made an error there regarding something, particularly the oil. Why? Midehu tama elel Rav, right? Because this was the issue that was relevant, appropriate to Rav. Rav, mashke beit mitbachaya tani. Rav taught, okay, in regards to the liquids that were associated with the butchering location. Aval mashke beit mitbachaya, but in regards to the liquids that were associated with the mizbeach, mitame, those would be susceptible, okay, right, to tumah. Okay? And that's where we're going to stop there, because then the Gemara wants to go into more detail, and we'll pick that up tomorrow. Okay? Anybody questions? Okay. So we've come at least to the point where we said that these 7 liquids, okay, that we mentioned, wine, honey, oil, milk, dew, blood, and water, are machshir, at least to Rabbanan. If not, according to the Oraita, according to the testimony. Okay, and we'll see if we come to a final conclusion on this over the next day or two. Okay. All right, everybody. Again, I thank you all, those who were for the Hanukkah item, and we'll see everybody tomorrow, God willing. Stay well.
Thank you very much. Have
Thank
a
you.
great week. Be well.
Thank you. Have a great
Bye.
Take care.